You are ready to make a change, but you're facing massive resistance, almost a form of self sabotage. A part of you is at war with another part of you, holding yourself back. I know I was going through this myself in early 2019 when I was going through my own mental health challenges in the midst of a massive identity shift, leaving my job as a paramedic, not knowing what I would be doing next. I went through a lot of shadow work and hypnotherapy, and after that came to this conclusion that I had to break through these three levels of resistance. And once I surrendered to these three things, I became a completely different person, and just in a matter of months, my identity shifted quickly. The old version of me is hardly recognizable now when I look back, and if it wasn't for these three things that I had identified and worked through, I would not be where I'm here today in front of you. So with that being said, let's get right into the video. Much of my experience comes from my own wisdom, my own realizations that I had working on myself, identifying the shadow side of me, this part of yourself that you may not be able to see but subconsciously runs under the surface. Now, in this process of becoming this new version of you, shifting your identity to who you desire to be, who you've desired you always wanted to be, there's three levels of resistance that you're going to face. And I encourage you to stay to the end of the video because I'm going to be going through each of these three phases, the unique challenges that you'll see at each phase, how to overcome them so you can finally be that version. But before we talk about that, let's look at the wisdom of Florence Scovel Shinn. She wrote this amazing book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. This book was written almost 100 years ago. And the wisdom in this book is just as relevant today as it was back then. Now, in this book, she talks about a specific law that holds people back from breaking through any of these levels. And this law is called the law of non-resistance. Whatever it is you resist persists. You may consciously want to make this change, but if you have old beliefs running in the back of your mind, conflicting beliefs that may have not been dealt with, it creates this sort of resistance, which then continues to make this problem persist in your reality. So part of this is actually dealing with what you believe to be true currently about your reality, looking at your behaviors, your thoughts, feelings, actions, words, and aligning everything into this new version of you. That'll make this process so much easier as you're even recognizing these barriers. And part of this is actually even using, everybody says, oh, be positive. But it's hard to be positive when you have these old beliefs running in your subconscious mind. This sort of programming that runs like a record, programmed from childhood sometimes even, that is continually making you fall back into these old grooves that you've created for yourself. So another way to easily sort of overcome this, especially when you're starting out on this journey, is this idea of detachment. You see, your emotions dictate a lot of your behaviors and actions, right? And if you have old emotions that have been reinforced by certain behaviors and results that you've received, you're going to continue falling back into these emotional patterns. But Florence Scovel Shinn here talks about emotion as energy in motion. And this energy has great power over us. So what you can actually do, following this law of non-resistance, is practice detachment. This is what they call letting go. And it doesn't mean you have to be positive, nor does it mean you have to be a doormat and let people walk over you. But this idea to detach yourself from the outcomes of anything that's happening in your life. Oftentimes we think too far ahead, and this creates a lot of resistance because it conflicts with our current and old beliefs. Now that we know that, how do we move through these three phases? What are these three phases that you must surrender to become this new version of you? Number one is your attachment to worldly things. Worldly things. This is your attachment to life's events, your ego. And your ego is actually your amigo. Don't get it twisted. Your ego is not something to crush or remove or to overcome, right? God gave us, God or the divine force, whatever you believe, gave us all the mental faculties to succeed in this reality. So why would we want to abolish this part of ourselves that's been given to us, the ego? And the thing with the ego is it can be something that can be mastered. And once you learn to master your ego, you can begin to move towards this new direction in life. You can begin to overcome this first barrier. Because oftentimes we think when going through life that things are happening to us, and our ego almost becomes this temperamental child that has control over our psyche. Now, the way to flip this is recognize your ego there is there to actually protect you, but you know better. You know what's good for you and what's not. And oftentimes, the ego will try and pull us back into the familiar in order to keep us safe. But you must consciously know, and know that infinite, expansive side of you is there, that you can move forward past this, lovingly holding the ego like a child and bringing him along or her along with you for the ride. And in this way, you can learn to master your ego and not be ruled by these sort of almost false gods of fear, anger, these lower level emotions, shame, that oftentimes dictate many of our choices in life. The second barrier is your thoughts and your emotions, otherwise known as your feelings, when these two things combine. And just as I touched earlier, your emotions are energy in motion, combined with your thoughts, which you have the ability to choose your thoughts. You are not your thoughts, first of all. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts have the ability to kind of stick to your mind. There's millions of thoughts that we get, bombarded with every day in this day and age. We see ads, we see commercials, we have to talk to friends. People have a general consensus around things that are happening. Look at the news. Everybody's in this herd mentality. And the key here with the thoughts and emotions is not to have this sort of external herd mentality of thoughts and emotions have control over you as an individual. This again goes back to detachment and being detached from the things that you do not desire, but then having your emotions and thoughts. And Neville Goddard actually talks about this. The feeling is the secret. That when you want to shift to a new identity, a new version of you, you must feel as if that version of you already exists, because it actually does. And quantum physics has actually already shown us this through theories like the many worlds theory, that basically states that every time you make a choice, the universe splits into a whole nother universe, which is crazy. It's crazy to wrap your mind around this. But every time you make a choice, or every time there's even a probability for you to make a choice, that version, that world of you already exists. And in this way, you're sort of a creator of worlds. You can create as you were created. But it comes down to mastering your thoughts and emotions, being the guard at the door of your mind, and making sure only the thoughts that are conducive to this new version of you, this new reality that you want to conceive, are being let in through that door. Feeling as if you already have those things, feeling the emotions that's natural to your identity, right? If you wanted to make millions of dollars and you're currently like a chill guy, like I'm more of like mellow, like that's my natural state, is to be mellow. I'm not going to be going around grinning like an idiot, pretending to be feeling overjoyed and all that, because that's not natural to me. Now, if it's natural to you and you have a naturally bubbly, exciting personality, align yourself with those feelings. Right? Think of that version of you that is even more abundant than you are now. And think of yourself as already being abundant. That's the best part of all this. You can begin to embody this version of you now, because your perception is what creates reality. And when you realize you can control your perception through your thoughts and feelings, then you will overcome the second barrier. So then, this leaves the last barrier blocking you from being that version of you finally that you've always desired. By now, when you're working through when you've mastered this second barrier, you've learned to master your ego, make it your amigo. At this point, you'll begin seeing shifts happening in your reality. You'll begin seeing how this connection between your internal state and your external state are deeply, deeply connected. You'll begin to feel more empowered and see that the barriers holding you back before were not real at all. They were self-imposed. And if that's actually something you're interested in, I also offer a 1-hour session called the Shift Session, where we do this exact thing and identify the barriers that are holding you back and crush those old beliefs. Well, giving you a blueprint at the end of basically how to move forward through these steps more effortlessly. There's a link down below if you're interested in that. But moving on, let's talk about the third phase. The third phase is surrendering to a divine will, to a higher version of you, to a higher power beyond you. And this can be difficult, but Neville Goddard puts it in a certain way that I think is so eloquent. He talks about the pearl of great price. This is a parable that comes from the Bible, the book of Matthew, where there's a merchant who sees a great pearl, who he knows, which he knows is so valuable. When he first sees it, he's willing to give up all of his worldly possessions, everything he has, to have this pearl of great price. Now, what it's saying here is not to sell everything that you have or sell any material possessions or anything like that. It's about surrendering your will to the divine will, to higher will. Because sometimes along this journey, what you intend to happen, what you've imagined to happen, what you think is going to happen next, and you're so sure it's going to happen, sometimes it turns out not to be. Sometimes something more negative happens. Sometimes something is even taken away from you. And in those moments, your faith, your trust in higher powers will be tested. This ability to know that the only power that exists is your power. That there's no external circumstances dictating how our reality pans out. There's no tarot cards, there's no readings, there's really nothing outside of yourself that can dictate what's going to happen. Because I'll tell you something. Even with tarot, like I really like reading tarot cards, but they have a way of sometimes communicating information. But realize that when you change your internal state, when you begin to shift who you are internally, those psychic readings, those tarot card readings are all going to change. But that's because you're changing them through your internal state. And in this way, we can take our power back, even when we're speaking to larger belief systems like religions, to put our faith outside of a God. You know, people ask me, do I believe in God? I say I don't believe in God because I actually have met God. I know him, because belief even leaves room for doubt. And the difference between belief and knowing is in knowing you have felt and heard and seen and experienced, and there's no room for doubt there. It's just as real as this coffee cup right here. You know it exists, right? You have no doubt that I'm holding this right now. And in this way, this is what he's talking about with the pearl of great price. Is to give up all your beliefs in the external things controlling you and realize you are the ultimate creator of your reality, that you have the ability to shift worlds. And even though sometimes consciously things might not make sense to you, things might not work out the way you expected, there's a greater plan at work. And there's an ultimate fate that will lead to the things that you've already put in motion, the things that you have dictated with your energy, your emotion, energy in motion. And in this way, you'll eventually get to this place where you'll look back at this incredible journey in such a short period of time and realize this was all you. It was you who was holding you back. And it was you who you let yourself go. And it is you who let yourself become this version of you. So until next time, check out the link below if you're interested in a shift session. And until next time, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I've seen a lot of people watching lately. Subscribe so you can join us on this journey. Until next time, peace.